All right, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to Dudes Talking, the Fourth Estate with Kevin Marsden. Here with me, I have a good friend, an esteemed researcher, Kevin Marsden, aka Agent Serco. Kevin, are you there?
I am indeed.
Glad to have you back on. It's been a while.
Yeah, lots happened, and well, you know, because you were one of the first people I reached out to when it happened.
Yeah.
So I wanna lay down a few things while I talk about it. I want people to, before they react or say anything, just to think and let me say the story of what happened, so that people can listen to that and also to take from it to help uh, themselves, or if they know somebody else who's in a similar situation, and how to cope with it. I mean, saying how to cope with it, I mean, it's difficult to talk about, but I'm gonna talk about it.
All right, Kevin, go ahead.
Well, let's start the story off. 2012, my father committed suicide, and of which I wasn't very compassionate about it. I mean, I was quite indignantly rude about it because he wasn't a good man. But at the same time, I also met a woman from Poland who then I started dating. And then in 2013, October the 1st, I made the decision to move to Poland, which I did with her. And we set up a home together with her son. And things were difficult at times because I'm not the easiest person to live with because of my condition and other things that were going on. But we poodled through things, and we were living in a place called Podkowa, which is about 20 kilometers outside of Warszawa. And things were great with her son. He'd settled into his new school because he didn't like moving or moving around, and he was quite surreal in things. He wasn't like a normal child, I can say that. You could give him a map, yeah, and he would be your GPS system because you wouldn't need a map in the car because it was all in his head. And like with Minecraft, I don't know if anyone knows what Minecraft is. It's like some building game with blocks, but unlike normal children, he didn't build houses for us. He built the substructure, then the all the trains and all the other stuff before he put the houses in. So he was different in that way, but he also had, you know, this humorous side, but he also had a very dark side, which was really controlled by his anger. So we had to deal with that at times, and because he could get very angry and sometimes could get violent. So things were going along. Then my ex lost, so I'll call her my ex, the partner at the time lost her job, and things went downhill. She got depressed. Situations was quite terrible where we were living. So we moved then to Old Town Warsaw. At first, Eliash was a bit offish about it, but he got round to it. We got him into a school, and the school, where he was top of the class in Podkowa, this new school, he was struggling. He was getting bullied by the teacher. He wouldn't go into school. He was getting more and more distant with things. So there were problems there because the education systems are, in my opinion, need a great big huge overhaul in all aspects. They shouldn't be degrading children and putting them down. They should be lifting children up and giving them confidence, as well as making understand how competition works and things like that. So things were going along. The relationship between myself and his mother was getting more and more strained, and then eventually last year we split up, July of last year. But we were still renting the place where we are still now at the moment in Warszawa. So she was going around to look for a place to live, and she found a place to live. She bought it. It's in the other side over in Praga. So she was supposed to move there in November, but because of all the lockdown and all the chaos going on, there was a problem with her moving there. So I said to her, well, she could stay here until she could move over there. Well, she was supposed to move in February last month. Meanwhile, Elias, her son, was getting worse and worse, locking himself away, sleeping all day, getting aggressive, getting nasty with his comments. And February the 5th, which was the crux day of it all, things went, for the week beforehand, it was getting really nasty. He was saying really horrible things. His mother knew there was something wrong with him, but she couldn't get her head around what was wrong with him.
Yeah.
He'd been going to a therapist for about, since 16, and he was 20, so he'd been doing a therapist every year, as he used to call it, his occupation. And we didn't know that they'd put him on antidepressants. We also didn't know that he'd stopped taking the antidepressants. And 3 weeks prior to this, his counsellor, whatever she is, decided to put herself in quarantine, so he wasn't able to go and talk to her. So he was spiralling down into this dark area. His mother knew there was something wrong, but nobody was telling her anything what was wrong. He was getting more and more aggressive and nasty. So she has a new boyfriend now who's a really nice guy. So she asked him to talk to him. So he went in there to talk to him on this Friday, February the 5th. And of course, Elias then got aggressive, tried to swing a punch, which Łukasz pinned him against the wall and told him, no, you're not going to do that, and told him to calm down and everything else. So at that point, my ex, with her new partner Łukasz, went out to go to Łukasz's place, and I thought everything would calm down then, because the mother was out of the environment and Łukasz was out, so I thought everything was fine. So I go in to make a cup of tea in the kitchen, and he walks out of his room, and I shrug my shoulders at him to say, don't look at me. At the end of the day, you picked a fight. That's something you have to deal with. It's your consequence. I didn't think much more of it, and then I went back into my room, sat down with my cup of tea, and the next thing I know, there was this almighty smash and crash sound, and I was like, what the? Because I have PTSD, triggered me. So I've sprung up and I've looked out the door, and his mother's printer is now in about 50 different pieces smashed across the hallway floor. And I looked at him and said, excuse my French here, but what the fuck do you think you're doing? But the contortion in his face was this like really snarly, aggressive. And he looked at me and he didn't say a word. And then he walked to the front door and he's staring at me with this really dark face, and then he slams the door, and that was, on this Friday night. So I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, what do I do? Do I clean this mess up, or do I just leave it there? It's going to cause a problem for me and the dog. So I ring his mother up and say, look, he's smashed your printer up. Your printer's across the whole floor. I suggest you get the police, because you're going to have to get the police involved now. So that's what she did. She went to talk to the police. But meanwhile, he hadn't returned home. So we thought, oh, he's gone to a friend, and that's it. Well, Saturday morning came. He hadn't returned back. And I know him because he's been in my life for 10 years nearly. So I know he'll skulk back about 11 o'clock. So 11 o'clock's come and gone. 3 o'clock in the afternoon's come and gone. By that point, I said, no, this is wrong. I said, you need to get to the police and put the missing persons in. He's not back. So she went to the missing persons. We had the Polish version of CID, or plainclothes police come round to take information, photographs of the damage, photographs of his room that was like something like out of Hiroshima. So anyway, Sunday, all the local community got together and everybody was looking for him. And then on Sunday, the news was given to us that on Friday night, he was killed. What had happened, he got so angry, he couldn't function or think straight. And with that anger, he'd stormed off, and he was walking down what he thought was probably a road, but actually it was a train track, because it'd been heavily snowing here. Yeah. And the train coming around the corner didn't see him. He didn't hear the train because he was obviously in this frenzied state. and it hit him and killed him outright. That was on Friday, February the 5th.
Man.
Luckily, it didn't disfigure him. It hit him from behind. It was instant, so he didn't suffer. And then you go to the stage, what's going through, we had the funeral on the following Thursday, which was really nice. It was in the oldest church in town. And the church itself, the ceremony was really beautiful. And there were so many people there. I didn't realise how many people were there, but they were everybody there, and including the kids he was at school with in Podkova had turned up. They had driven all the way up there. And then at the end of the funeral, his mother, my ex, picked up his urn and she walked it to the car, and to the funeral car, and then it was taken to Białystok to be laid to rest with the family. And all these kids that from Podkova, they all went up there in a van to Białystok, which is about a 3-hour drive in the snow. And it was amazing to hear all this, but there were lots of questions we had to ask. Like, for instance, why was he on the drugs? Why wasn't we told about the drugs? This was the problem, and this is why I'm finding it difficult to talk about it, because I'm still quite angry about it. I'm very angry about quite a few things, but on the day of the funeral, on the Thursday, that day I come back, I was so angry with a few things that had happened. And I couldn't go to Białystok because of my legs, and I didn't want to be, there with the family, even though he'd been in my life for 10 years. I thought it would be best to immediate family and the people around Marta at that time. And every night she's been like in tears, and we'll be having to talk with one another, trying to reassure her. But I've not really mourned it. I don't have any emotions to it, which probably makes me sound quite callous. But something very strange happened to me, which I've not talked about. But it was on the Friday morning after the funeral. I was woken up by a golden light by the side of me, and a face that turned around and smiled. And then it went. But I have been completely at peace since then.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. I don't know what it is. I've checked all avenues. Could it have been a light coming through from the window? Was I dreaming? I can't explain. I cannot explain. And I'm not going to go into that whatsoever. But the immense relief on Friday morning, which like lifted everything from me. Which is why I'm talking about it being difficult to talk about, because I don't want it to be coming out wrong, and I don't want people to take the wrong idea of it, because Elias was gifted in many ways, but he was a very troubled soul. He had this darkness in him. But the thing that I really put down to the whole reason why his situation got worse is the lockdowns. It's the lockdowns that I think completely contributed to the situation that eventually led to his death. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. These lockdowns are wrong. They're absolutely wrong. And sorry, John. You carry on. Sorry.
No. I agree with you on that. I've never been in favor for the lockdowns. I think it's an issue. I think it's caused a lot of problems, especially doing blanket lockdowns in different parts of the world, having whole entire countries locked down. You could make the argument for a specific city or region, but I mean that's it. It ends up leading. I mean, how long have we been under lockdown here in the United States, a different form or degree, since we had was it 10 days to stop the spread when Burks came out with Trump and everything?
Yeah. 7 days to stop the spread.
7 days, and then 7 days then became 30, and then became 90. So
yeah, and then it became a year in certain cases, where the people in power have gone completely punch drunk on power. But we have a friend who's a priest in the UK, so we rung him up, obviously, to talk to him. And one of the questions we asked him was, how many people have you buried because of COVID? One. He's in London. This priest is in London, by the way. He's buried one person from COVID, but he's buried about 5 teenagers. The last one was a 17-year-old who committed suicide, who couldn't handle the lockdowns. So the lockdowns are actually destroying and killing our youth, because that's wrong. And the fact that they can't go anywhere, there's no places open. I'm seeing small businesses being destroyed. I've watched people I know who own restaurants here. They're nearly going out of business. They're on their last legs. The hospitality trade's dead. They've killed the hospitality.
Yeah, you can get hotels cheap right now, like really cheap.
You know, and this is wrong, because it's a cold. It's nothing more than a bloody cold with a 99% survivability rate. Yeah, it's a bad cold, but it's a cold. If it was Ebola, that's a different story. Yeah, I get it if it was Ebola, because that's got God knows what percentage death rate to it.
Or if it had the percentage of death rate of a severe flu, greater than 1%, it doesn't have that.
No, and this is the thing, what has also angered me is the biggest culprits of pushing this fear and making people react the way they are and accepting this is the media. The media has pushed and pushed and pushed this narrative, and they haven't stopped it. I mean, one of the classic idiots of it is in the news now, because he's been cancelled himself, which is that Piers Morgan. And these people are, this is what I'm going to be concentrating on in April when I start uploading stuff, is I am going to concentrate on showing the media for what it is. You know, because look at the situation in New York. Most of us knew what was going in New York, but the media didn't show it. Social media shut anybody down questioning it, saying it was fake news. And now it turns out that the governor of New York has killed more people than 9/11. And then they're talking now about giving us health passports. I mean, what's next? If you don't take the vaccine, we're going to have little yellow stars. I'm sorry, this has got to stop. A 20-year-old boy is dead that had so much to look forward to because of this insanity.
And it's gonna keep going on. I think we'll probably get a reprieve during the summer, it looks like, the way they're setting things up now. And then for another hard winter, it looks like Italy is actually about to go in lockdown again. And the lockdown that they had last year was quite severe.
But for what? Look, Porton Down is one of these weird places in the UK that does all these experimentation. But for years, they were experimenting, trying to find a cure for the common cold. Guess what? They never found the cure for the common cold. This coronavirus, but this again goes to the coronavirus. Where's the details of patient zero? No one knows who patient zero is still to this day.
That's correct, yes.
Okay? And the World Health Organization, the guy in charge of that, Peter Lanza, or whatever his name was, has got massive conflicts of interest, and he's doing the blooming investigation.
And of course, I mean, remember Tedros' connections to communist China.
Tedros is a joke, but it's the other people underneath him. Again, distraction again. Look at Tedros, don't look at the other people.
It's true, yes. That is true, I agree. Same with Bill Gates.
It's like all this royal nonsense at the moment. Look at that, don't look over here. Like with the COVID deaths in New York, they're now talking about, oh, look at all these women he's abused, instead of talking about the 15,000 elderly patients that he sentenced to death. Nobody talks about that. You see, because Elias is just going to be another statistic. oh, it was a tragedy, blah, 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 blah. But nothing's going to be done about it because, oh, it's just another thing, because it means nothing to them. Meanwhile, I'm watching his mother every night break down. I'm having to deal with that every night with her. Today, she's at another funeral, this time of her nephew, who's dropped down dead.
Well,
So she just buried her son, and now she's having to bury her cousin.
There are studies that have shown of the negative mental health effects that the COVID lockdowns have done. You know, children not being able to go to schools, and you know, people not being able to have normal social functions. And they've discussed increased cases of spousal abuse and increased cases of child abuse, because of the stress that people were put under, you know, the COVID lockdowns, on top of you know, people not being able to, you know, go to school or go to social functions or even go to work, and the financial hardships and strains that it's pushed on people. And it's sad. It's sad that the cases of abuse are on the rise, and no one's talking about that. They're not discussing the fallouts directly from the lockdowns. It's like anytime anyone tries to discuss it or whatever, it's just pushed to the side. They're like, well, exactly. Stiff upper lip. You know, we got to get through this.
It's like Kev Baker's just saying there. This will get your channel pulled. You shouldn't get it pulled. People should be able to talk about what's going on. I'm telling you about what happened to my former stepson, who's now dead, who was killed on February the 5th. But we're not talking about an even bigger problem that's on the horizon that no one's talking about. There's a bigger problem coming. Well, what happens when you lock everything down and you stop people from working? What is one of the main industries that was also probably locked down in many ways as well, which is the agricultural trade, the farmers. So is there going to be a food shortage now because of all this?
Yes, there will be. And Jesse Spots has discussed that. There will be a food shortage, and there've also been shipping issues with the supply chain. And I almost wonder, because I have a friend who works in supply chain logistics, and we've discussed this. We almost wonder if there's some sort of forced scarcity, and that they're just putting a lot of like products of certain goods, like the old paper towels and toilet paper, that they were put in warehouses and stored to make artificial scarcity. And that's a real possibility. I mean, you know, there's cargo containers that haven't made it across China yet. I mean, that haven't left the ports in China, or even sitting in the ports here in the United States. And one thing, if you can go look, if people might notice in the U.S., go to your local Best Buy and look to see if you can find an Xbox 360, an Xbox One, or PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. You might find a few Switches. But I had to get an Xbox to replace my son's Xbox that had broken, and I just went in to buy him an Xbox One, and I couldn't find any. I had to go to a pawn shop where they were literally selling if it was 2 years ago, I could buy a used Xbox One about $150, $100, somewhere around there. I could only find one after going to 10 pawn shops, and it was $250 just for that. And they were selling Switches for more than $300, for more than market value at the pawn shop. I mean, they were entering, and I've noticed this throughout the pandemic, we're entering a phase where even in the United States, no longer can you enter a store and get what you want. And I understand that that's a privilege to a first world country like the United States, but the thing is it's gotten so bad now where it isn't like you go in and like one or two things are out of stock. You go in and a lot of things are out of stock.
Which then brings to the thing is when you start looking at people like Mr. Jill Bates, and Jill Bates is buying up a lot of farmland along with his billionaire chums. Why? And then when you look at Jill Bates, everybody talks about vaccines with him. Again, distraction. Why isn't anybody talking what he was doing with the agriculture in Africa and in India?
Why wasn't anybody discussing that Warren Buffett is now, his wealth has increased so much during the pandemic that now he's worth more than $100 billion?
Yeah, but you know what they do? They do it through these foundations. They create these foundations, John, and they shuffle the money across there, get tax exemption, and it's like a big, huge deposit of savings. So the money doubles up, doubles up, and doubles up all the time, and they give a little bit here and a little bit there. But the rest of the time, that money is increasing all the time. That's why these people are getting richer. Like the Borgs, as I call them, from Facebook. Mr. and Mrs. Borg, where they said, "Oh, we're going to give it to our little baby Borg, 95 million, whatever it was, in this trust fund and this foundation." It's all this. They've been lying and scamming people for a long, long time. And it's crazy. And like you said, you're seeing things, and I'm seeing things here as well, in Europe, that you can't get hold of anymore, or if you find it, it's really expensive now.
Yeah.
So the poor and the vulnerable are going to be the ones that are going to suffer the most. They're the ones that. This is why I'm trying to bang on about trying to get people to get back to communities and working together in communities and get to know your neighbours and talk to one another. Forget bloody internets and phones. Go and physically talk to your neighbours, find out who they are, and start to realise who in your community is at risk, from this situation, and pull together as a community and work together as a community. Because if it does go the way I think it could go, it's going to get rough. It is going to get rough, and that's the scary bit. I mean, they're still building a wall around Washington, D.C. because they know that it is not for the white supremacist far right. It's against their own people, because when their people wake up to what they're doing, they're the ones that are going to be violent and going to try and go in there to take it down.
And it's not when God Emperor Trump returns on the throne, because Biden hasn't been president this all time either, though.
Biden will be out soon, because they cannot keep this facade.
I mean,
up.
no, he can barely talk.
This media facade with Biden is beyond a joke. The man is mentally incapable of doing anything. He is shuffling around. He forgets things. He looks as if he's on another planet. He's dazed and confused. And they're trying to make out this is the guy in charge. No, he's not.
I agree. It was like when Ronald Reagan was president, and it was really George W. Bush, and it's whoever's pulling the strings of Biden. I don't necessarily believe it's Kamala Harris. So
no, she's just as much a puppet as well. It's the people like BlackRock that are embedded right in there with him. Those people, the corporations. Remember, it was a corporate Labour/government takeover of the government, basically. So it created a real what is a fascist state. That is what a fascist state is, when the corporations link with the labour force or the unions and the government and work as one unit, which is what's going on now in America. The very thing they call everybody else of is exactly what they're doing now. And I'm watching in horror at these lunatics in your Congress who are trying to pass all these lunatic bills. Like, for instance, this relief bill. What's it relieving? It's relieving people money out of their pockets and their children's pockets and their great-grandchildren's pockets, because it's this is going to crucify everybody financially, so that her skeletal face can have some more ice cream in the freezer. I mean, this is unreal, and the fact that they've got this. The troops still in Washington, D.C. You've got more troops there than what there is in Afghanistan. I mean, this is your capital of your city, and you cannot even get into to the people's house. I mean, what's next? Mandatory vaccinations? Are they going to force people to take
I don't think they're going to get there. I think they're going to make it so that you can't, like, get on a plane. You can't travel internationally. You
Welcome to
can't
the Chinese social credit
you
score
can't
system.
go to a rock concert. Um,
Welcome to
I
the
don't
social
think they'll
credit
do
score.
interstate travel. I don't think they'll do interstate travel, but I could be wrong. It could get to the point with forced vaccinations. I just don't. I think it's going to be through more virtue signaling and societal pressure, keeping up with the Joneses.
It's the social credit score system. It's come through the back door. It's, bless you, it's just like what the banks are doing with this ESG, environmental social governance. How many people know about that? I've checked both my banks, both of them are involved in it, but they haven't told their customers they're involved in it. So this environmental social governance is another social credit score system coming in. They should look. The bank is about banking money, whether you put it in or take it out or borrow money. It should not be involved in moralistic or altruistic viewpoints. It's a bank. It's a business. Now it's getting involved in all of this by tying itself to the Paris Climate Accord. And this is quite scary, along with the health passports. And we've got the, what was his name? Hancock in the UK, the health minister, turning around trying to say that they were considering mandating the injections to the national health nurses. I mean, this is unreal. And apparently there's something going on in Israel with that at this precise moment. Well, my ex paid me something the other day about this person putting out there that they're mandatory forcing people to take the vaccine in Israel.
There is some truth to that, yes. And did you see that the Pfizer CEO was going over to meet with Bibi Netanyahu ahead of the Israeli election? And was kind of going to do like this event, but he wasn't allowed in Israel because he had not gotten the vaccine yet. The CEO of Pfizer. And they're like, oh, it's because he's waiting to get the vaccine because he wouldn't think it's fair if he got the vaccine. And it's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you lead by example. If you want somebody to do that, you put it in your arm first. I mean, I'm not going to take it. I'm sorry, but I will refuse to take it because obviously I have a history with what vaccines do to my body. And what am I going to get? A little yellow star, or maybe find some space in here with some colour-coded bar on me to say I'm unclean and I'm not.
Well, you'll have to live out in the woods in a tent, Kevin. That's what you'll have to do.
No, it's just madness. And then with the banks bringing in the ESG and all that, and like I said, nobody's talking about the elephant in the room, which could be this huge food shortage, which will create another catastrophe where people starving and violence can be erupting from that. This is madness, and they've brought. I mean, this is the Davos lunatics. But as I've been showing, it goes back to the 1930s, and prior to that, it goes back to the 1800s. All this lunacy. I mean, the best one is the guy they talk about science and they based everything from science was Charles Darwin, and he was an anti-vaxxer. Darwin was against the smallpox vaccine.
That's interesting. I didn't even know that. Wow, really?
Yeah, he believed that we were allowing the weakest people to survive, and the altruism of the medical society was allowing the weaker people to survive, and he was against the people getting the smallpox vaccine. This is the guy
So the same people that
that's the guy where the word eugenics comes from, because it was his cousin or his nephew. I think it was his cousin that termed the terminology of eugenics. That's where it started from Darwin. And the person that was pushing that was Huxley, Thomas Huxley, who was known as Darwin's bulldog. And of course, his two grandsons, Aldous Huxley and Sir Julian Huxley. Sir Julian Huxley was the head of the Eugenics Society, was also good friends with Margaret Sanger.
No, you're right about Darwin. You guys can Google it. There's quite a few actual. There's an article from the CDC. There's a study that was done where people were writing about smallpox. But yeah, Darwin was against compulsory smallpox vaccine. That's interesting.
So again, trust the science. The great temple, the new church of science, we must bow down to, because the priests of it, the bureaucratic scientists, like the Faucis of the world, who will chop and change their tune depending on what political wind is going at the time.
To the same people that they hold up on a pedestal like Charles Darwin and Darwinism, trust the science or whatever.
Well, it's like the climate change story, yeah? Well, that was started in 1853 by a guy called John Tyndall, who worked out what greenhouse gases were in 1853. And he was working alongside Faraday. Because the information, and it's like everything else. It's like when you go back to the Dark Ages, how the organized religion had been perversely twisted to fit a narrative like witchcraft and all that, and everybody's devils and repentant sin and punishment and all that. In the Dark Ages, it was like that at the beginning with the church. It's the same thing now happening with anybody who disbelieves anything to do with science, or you're a heretic, basically, or you're a non-believer, or you're a planet killer, or whatever. Because science should be fluid. You should be able to ask the questions. Like, for instance, with this virus, we should have the information in there. For instance, they should give us a data sheet breaking it down, showing us, for instance, age groups, people wearing masks, people not wearing masks, so we can see the data for ourselves and make an informed decision from it. But if you notice, they've not given us any of that data. And the original model set up about how many people were going to die was from this Professor Lockdown, Dr. Ferguson, from Imperial College London, who was using a 20-year a software program that was 20 years out of date. The same lunatic that said millions were going to die from mad cow's disease. And yet they relied on him, and that went around the world, and it locked everybody down.
Yeah.
Because yes, at the beginning, when it hit Italy, from when the people left Wuhan after the festival, they went back to Italy because they were cheap labour and building for the Italian fashion industry. And they took it back with them because they were let out from there, but they weren't allowed to move around within China, but they were allowed to leave China. Yes, at the beginning, it was very virulent, it was very strong, but it's dying off. It's obvious it's dying off. Because at the beginning, yes, it was, it was killing lots of people, especially the elderly, on people with immune system problems. So at the beginning, yes, we should have taken caution, and I agree with that. But the fact that they've just hung on to this was all political in one way, because they wanted to get rid of somebody because they didn't want them there. So they used that to bludgeon people. But at the same time, they've got so drunk on power, they don't want to give it up. I mean, the complete fast that's in the UK happening is beyond a joke. And you're hearing about kids dying, and no one's talking about it.
People committing suicide.
Yeah, like I said, the church, the last one he buried was a 17-year-old. I've lost my former stepson who was 20 years old. He had a whole life ahead of him, gifted. He was at architectural university. He's not going to go anywhere. Why? Because he's dead. So they're going to kill the older generation, and they're killing the younger generation. I mean, what is the purpose of this? They're destroying the kids at school so they can't go to school. And the ones that do go to school are terrified to go to school because they're frightened by, if they don't agree with what's being taught to them, they're going to be attacked and then shunned because they're going to be cured all these things by the education system. This is lunacy we're living through. But I did one about the sex education thing that they're trying to push through.
Okay, why don't you discuss that?
Well, it goes back again to Aldous Huxley's book. I know it goes back to the Brave New World. But when you look at it, the system, like you said, talk about the children are playing with themselves or whatever as a normal thing, you know, because that's what they're teaching the kids. Like, oh, masturbation is normal. But they're not talking to 14, 15, 16. They're teaching them from 5 upwards. And the European ones are saying they've got to teach them from birth about sex and sexuality. I mean, what is wrong with these people? Do they not believe that a child should have a childhood? Yes, you should be able to tell your children, if somebody touched you there, that's bad, you must report it to an adult. Yeah? That's about the limit they should have up to a certain age. And then they can learn about things like that, but not push about gender or it's okay to be this, it's okay to be that, and masturbation, and talk about oral sex and anal sex and all. These are kids, for God's sake. And they're pushing that in there.
Well, a lot of that comes from Alfred Kinsey and the sexual revolution. And even before then, you could say that it was being pushed by
one of the biggest pushes
who's the guy who did orgone therapy?
The biggest pusher of it, John, is Planned Parenthood. Again, going back to our friend Margaret Sanger.
Someone help me in the chat. Who did Orgonite? Who was the psychologist? Why am I drawing a blank on this guy's name? I can't think of the orgone therapy.
There's the worst thing you could have done, Becca. Pull your children out of school. It's about time you start doing that.
Wilhelm Wright. So you got Wilhelm Wright. You had Alfred Kinsey. And Alfred Kinsey was outed by Judith Reisman, which I need to actually reach out to her. Even though she had affiliation with the CMP, she later spoke out against him and said that they weren't doing anything to stop the spread of pornography or the sexualization of children. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it had to do with Wilhelm Reich. Thank you, Oswald. Alfred Kinsey.
Well, you know, I can go, because of what I'm doing at the moment, research-wise, I'm doing into the media, and I've been looking at people like Walter Durante, who is married to Jane Cohen, I think her name was. I've got the documentation. I mean, let me see what the name was, the woman's name. Bear with me 1 second. What was her name? Oh, I've lost it. Walter Durante. It was the guy that hid the Ukrainian starvation, the Holodomor, while suckling up to Stalin, because the liberals on the left have always been in love with Stalin, even to this day. What was his name of his wife? But this gets even more bizarre. I can't find her name at the moment. And she was involved with Aleister Crowley, and so was Walter Durante.
I don't even know who you're talking. You've lost me.
Right, Walter Durante was the guy who worked for the New York Times, who was stationed in Moscow in the 1930s as their correspondent. And through collectivism, Stalin had ordered all the grain to be brought in to Moscow, but none was to be left in the land. So in other words, the people were left to starve to death. About 5 to 6 million people died of starvation in 1932 to 1933. This is before even Hitler came to power. So through that, but what had happened was that people were starting to hear rumours about what was going on. So Walter Durante would run cover for the Stalin's regime in Russia by saying, oh, the people are hungry. It's not really a problem. They're not starving. They're just hungry. So he covered it up through the New York Times. He also got a Pulitzer Prize, which they've still not removed from him as well for his work in Russia. So he's still got a Pulitzer Prize. So the New York Times was involved in that. The New York Times was also involved in covering up with what was happening in Eastern Europe regarding the Germans and the death camps that the Germans had built. So the media's had all this thing going along, like the same thing with the 1619 Project, which is coming out of the New York Times.
Yeah.
So you see, and the reason being is if you go back to 1905, was when it was the St. Petersburg massacre, or otherwise known as Bloody Sunday, where the Tsar's forces opened up on the anarchists and the Bolsheviks and the communists, who then, some of them fled, and they took with them their ideology and their newspaper, which was Pravda, and they took it all the way to West Coast and East Coast of America. So that's why you've got West Coast and East Coast have quite a lot to do with communism, because it was brought in there in 1905.
So where do you think?
So just one second, John.
Okay.
What do you mean shouting at clouds? The British action just makes me nervous, and photos Jason Goodman. Do you want to enlighten me on that one?
Yeah. Do you want to discuss how you? I don't know the answer to that. Do you want to discuss your? I mean, we've done an episode with me and Lee Veltman, and you discussing, you being slandered by Jason Goodman and David Hawkins,
which I exposed all of that. This is why I started on this journey in the first place, was exposing Hawkins, McConnell, and Goodman.
And by proxy, Jack.
And I then exposed Kevin Shipp as well along the line of that
and by proxy, Jack Posobiec,
and Jack Posobiec as
Navy intelligence officer.
Yeah, so I exposed Posobiec, I exposed Goodman, and I also exposed more on what's his name, Mr. Webb, just George Webb. Jason Goodman's still pushing that nonsense with Hawkins. I mean, it's ridiculous, but people will pay money for it. That's their choice. The fact that the evidence has shown that this guy is a charlatan and a fraud is there for everyone to see.
Banat asked if you're still friendly with Acton.
No. Me and Mr. Acton had a very how do I put it? It was a situation that blew up between Mr. Acton, myself, and Mr. Outram, of which I realised that I was being played by those two as well, and I was really pissed with a lot of them.
Yeah, Steve. Don't get me started.
Because I'll say the story about how Hawkins and McConnell ended up with Goodman, and then the split between McConnell and Hawkins was to do with insane in the Ukraine. Myself and one other did research on Ukraine and Mr. Goodman and his company that was in Ukraine at the time, when he was working for the Aerocine, in which he denied ever going to Ukraine, and he made this big hoo-ha about it, and he ordered that they take it down from the Able Danger site, this video, because it was blasphemous. He'd never been to Ukraine in his life. Roll forward about a year, and he's having an interview. Mr. Goodman is having an interview with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, in which he admits he went to Ukraine once. So what is it? Did he not go, or did he go?
Yeah. So you're telling me there's some issues in the alternative media as well. Kevin, is that what you're telling me?
Well, no, because this is the point. There were so many people on I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and it was really crazy. But the reason why I got involved with Acton was because Goodman, through Hawkins, was doing something very despicable to Acton's father, accusing him basically of being involved, or his things being involved with the what's the name, that bloody Charles murder they keep going on about. The little girl that was murdered.
Madeleine McCann?
No, not Marilyn McCann. The other one, in the one that was dressed up as a doll all the time, and
John Benet Ramsey.
No, the one that they used against Montegraph as well, accused him of being involved in it.
Yeah, it was John Benet Ramsey.
John Benet Ramsey. Sorry, yeah, John Benet Ramsey. So that was the one that was being the utilisation, and that's how I got involved with Acton at the beginning. And at the beginning it was all right, but then things started falling apart, and then my account got hacked. Then a few other things went on, and I got very paranoid, very, very paranoid of what was going on. And then I realised that things weren't right. And then I noticed that in one of these Insane in the Ukraine things that Mr. Altrincham put out, he then puts my name on the paper, even though I said I didn't want to be, part of it at the time. He says, I'll give you the information, but leave me out of it. And then I think it was the third thing, he puts my name in it. And also another thing that Hawkins was laughing with Goodman at the time when they were up in Canada at the Piggy Palace place, which is another thing I exposed as well of him making stories and lies about. We're laughing about my medical condition and how I was at the time. So where did they get that information from? Because I hadn't given that information out, but there was a couple of people that did know that information. So I had nothing more to do with them whatsoever. I mean, they can, have a go at me. They can call me whatever. I don't care. I'm not interested. I don't want nothing to do with them. What I'm more interested in doing now is doing what I'm doing, which is to bring to light what historical connections there are and how things are playing out again, because we seem to be repeating the same patterns. But I'm not going to turn around and say, oh, so-and-so raped so-and-so to some Illuminati ritual, because I'll leave them to them nutters, because that's what they want to talk about. Let them crack on. I'm going to show people, like, for instance, when I talk about Walter Durante, I'm going to show also about Gareth Jones. I'm going to show how the New York Times tried to smear Gareth Jones, the guy that brought to the world's attention and what was happening in Ukraine, at the same time of other things that were going on that happened in Russia, in a place called Katyn and Smolensk. That why did the Americans and the British ally with a guy that was a bigger monster than actually Adolf Hitler? And then at the end of it, allow that monster to basically take over the whole of the Eastern Bloc and put all those people in probably the worst situation going through the collectivism and nonsense of communism. You see, because when in '89 in Poland, when communism fell, in the Bieszczady, which is in the mountains where they were building the buses and that, which was where the Polish buses were built down there, nobody had any work. They couldn't feed their children, so the children were starving, and they couldn't get money. They couldn't feed their kids or nothing. There was nothing put in place when communism collapsed. It was the people of Poland that got together that helped clothe and feed the children in the mountains.
So where do you think it's going, Kevin? In the next few months, what do you think is going to happen?
Oh.
I know we're speculating, but what do you think's what do you think's going to?
Well, I think they're going to keep playing this card with the COVID lockdown, so they're going to keep doing that. They'll cause distractions. They'll probably start a war somewhere to keep us distracted from whatever else they're doing, because that's what it is. It's look over here, but don't look here routine. I think we're going to have to look at financial situations. Are they going to create a financial crash? Is that what they're trying to do, is create a financial crash to bring in this great reset where we don't have to own anything? We don't have to own houses or anything, because we'll all be part of stakeholder capitalism. Are they trying to push it through using the COVID? I don't know. I know it's a bit of speculation, but things are looking like that. That's what they're trying to do. They're crashing the economies. They've destroyed all the small businesses, which is the engine of any economy, as anybody knows. And they're not giving it. I mean, like for instance, in the UK, they're talking about June coming out of lockdown. I mean, what kind of lunacy is that? This has to stop. We are all grown adults. We wake up in the morning. We get up, we make a risk assessment of putting the kettle on. If it's electric, we could electrocute ourselves. We go in the bathroom. We could put the light on without realizing there's water on there. We could electrocute ourselves. We make that risk assessment. We walk outside the door. There's a road there. We cross over the road. We make the risk assessment of walking over that road. So what any difference is it of making the risk assessment of this so-called virus that is 99% survivability rate?
So, yeah, I mean, I guess we're going to continue having being forced at our social media ghettos as they continue to gaslight us by distracting us with cancel culture. Not to say that that's not an issue, it is, but they're going to continue doing that to distract us from while they're pulling the rug of civilization out from underneath us.
Well, they're destroying the whole of Western culture, and one of the biggest things they're attacking also is religious belief and religious thoughts. Why? Well, if you go to my last video, I show you a book that I built for my degree, which was on the three monotheistic religions. And one of the things was in there was about religion and conflict. And when you've got two major ideologies in an area, one will try to destroy the other one to become the dominant ideology and then take over completely. Well, let's look at it this way. Science is the new ideology of this group here, these lunatics of, oh, trust the science, trust the science. This is the church of the science, yeah? So that's the ideology, yeah, versus Christianity, which is, is their problem. So they're going to use that to crush the church, which we've seen in places like California and that, where they didn't allow people to go to church services, wouldn't allow people to go to get spiritual guidance or healing.
Yeah, they were doing that here in North Carolina at the very beginning of the pandemic. That people to have church services either had to have them online or like preachers were like you could go to your car and drive up to the church and they would like speak like using like a PA system or something.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, locking everybody in, so they're going to be using the internet all the time. So they're not going to sort of get out of this insanity. So they're going to get more and more angry, and it's going to create more and more conflict. So eventually, it's going to explode. It's like a pressure pot at the moment, and eventually, it's going to explode.
Yeah, Oswald in the chat says, "Is your dissertation anywhere online so people can look at it?"
Yeah, I'll have to find it again. I'll put it in a link somewhere. I have to open up. Hang on a minute, I'll do that.
So I mean, they got to get to the point where they destroy the middle class, which is coming. And then it really truly will be the 99 versus the 1% at that point. I mean, look how wealthy, some of the puppets that they put out there for the elite, how much money Elon Musk has made during the pandemic, or Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, or any of them, how much their if it's even true, how much their monetary value has increased. Jeff Bezos, during the pandemic, it's skyrocketed. It's shot up like a rocket. So where does all that wealth come from? There has to be a transfer of wealth for that wealth to occur, and it's proof that we live in a corptocracy at this point.
The link's there.
Okay. It's proof that we live in a corptocracy at this point, and
well, I mean, this is the thing which people don't realise. When we talk about World War II, who were the victors? Well, it wasn't the Allies; it was the corporations. And don't forget, as I pointed out, how Coca-Cola was involved with Nazi Germany from the 30s. IBM was involved with that. None of them took any consequences for their actions, what they were doing, which was propping up the Hitler regime and supporting the Hitler regime, including Ford, including General Motors and all that. But then after the war, things like Volkswagen, which was also involved in that. All these businesses got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah,
And that's the point. When you've got 100 of the most richest things in the world, 59 of them are corporations to 41 countries.
and the businesses were propping up Russia, communist Russia, who was our ally during World War II.
Russia was. This is what people made the mistake of. Russia was a closed shop. You couldn't open a business up. Everything was owned by the state in Russia. Every business, every farm, everything was run by the state. There was no private businesses. This is what it was like under Mao in China. Then things changed when they started bringing stuff into China, which is now why China's like this sort of weird communist capitalist society, where the rich get rich and the poor just are slaves, basically, or you can just go to a nice internment camp to be re-educated. But that's how China's model has changed, because all the corporations which got into that market, when they brought down the wall in 1989 and they brought down communism, that meant the corporations did what? They went straight into Eastern Europe because it was fertile land, because there was no companies there, which is where you got the likes of, what was his name? Bill, the guy who brought in Magnitsky Act. Bill. Oh, I can see him now. But he was the guy that was an American, rescinded his American thing.
Bill Browder.
Bill Browder. So Bill Browder and all these vultures went into Eastern Europe. That's what happened in '89 in Poland. They all came in there, and it literally took over nearly everything. So the corporations, basically, it's like they create the conflict using the military-industrial complex. Then once everything's sort of left there with nothing there, the corporations go in and then take over all that area and all the businesses, and then they run everything. So how long is it going to be before the whole planet has got no governments, but we work for a corporation, or we're what's the name? Owned by the corporations. You know, you are such and such, this corporation here, that's who owns you. So we're going to then have corporation wars?
It's something that's happening in Nevada right now. Let me look it up real quick. It's called, have you ever heard of opportunity zones?
Yeah.
So in Nevada, they're trying to pass it so that corporations will be able to pretty much have their own cities, and are able to do their own laws, much like a city within a state is able to do so. And you have Elon Musk.
Mr. Rebozo, Bebe Rebozo, he didn't go to the USSR because the USSR was completely gone by '93. He went to Russia.
But the corporation zones or whatever, they want Elon Musk is trying to lobby for that to happen. So now corporations are going to be their own cities. It's going to be like that one book Snow Crash, libertarian corporate paradise. It's sad, but that's what's going to happen.
If you really want something scary to look at and something really nightmarish, where Mr. Jill Bates, is deciding that he wants to create an agricultural farming using AI and robots, using and creating stuff that he's got connections to Monsanto and GMOs.
Interesting.
There's a wonderful woman, Shiva, from India, who talks about. There's a lot of things I don't agree with her on, but she's very informative about what Mr. Jill Bates was doing in India, and what he was, how they set up all this. Oh, look, we're going to help you poor Indian farmers. We're going to put internet in there. We're going to give you phones. We're going to do all this. They gave them all that, and then they were stealing all the information that these these farmers had, from years and years handed down to them about seed and how to look after seeds and how to do crops and all that. And they were taking all that information. So what she called him a biopirate. He was a philanthropist biopirate. That's what she called him.
That's interesting.
He was stealing all of that and then selling it back to them. I stand corrected, Rebozo, but he wouldn't have been able to build Trump Tower at that time in '87.
Yeah, I looked it up. It's 87. So what do you want to talk about in closing, Kevin?
I think that we've got to realize that the medical side of life, these medical professionals, psychiatrists, child psychiatrists, are dangerous. That if you know somebody who's got a child that's suffering in that you ensure that if you have to go to any of these child psychiatrists, that you make sure that you're completely informed at all times of anything that's going on with them, so that you can also then help in understanding the situation.
Yes, you want to make sure that you go with your child.
Also, that children shouldn't be given any sort of drugs, any sort of antidepressants or anything like that, because their bodies aren't fully developed, and we don't know what reaction is going to be and how they're going to react to it. So we need to have a more understanding. So and if you have got kids, listen to them. Spend some time with them. Hug them. Build them up. Tell them how much you love them. Because there's things now that I wish I'd said to Elias. I wish I'd helped him more. Now there's lots of what ifs. I mean, that's understandable. There's lots of what if. What if I'd stopped him going out that door that time? That extra minute of arguing. If I'd argued him at the door for a minute, would that have saved his life? Would that have changed things? You go through that because there's that element of guilt, but don't let guilt be also used as shame, because that's another thing these people like to do. They like to put people with guilt and then use shame as well to make you feel shame for having that guilt. We've got to talk to one another. We've got to stop arguing about politics and he's right, who's right. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. What matters is your community and the people around you, and your family and the other people's families. You've got to look after each other. You've got to look out for them. For God's sake, what is it? Love thy neighbour.
Yes, love thy neighbour as thyself.
Love thy neighbour as thyself, and treat people how you wish to be treated yourself. And if you live in a good life, and if you've got the opportunity to help other people, then help other people. It doesn't have to come with a price tag, because the price tag is the fact that the giving is the love you're giving someone else. If you do something like give somebody a gift and want something back in return, that's not a gift, that's a transaction.
And what I've seen through the United Kingdom is that though kids are given antidepressants over there, there's actually guidelines that they should not be, except for
unfortunately, I'm in Poland, which is a whole different set of rules over here.
In the United States, they're giving out like candy, and you're right. The child's brain hasn't even developed yet fully. They say your brain actually really hasn't developed yet until about your mid-20s, and so you wouldn't. I don't know why. It's like I don't even from a supplemental standpoint, I don't recommend giving melatonin to children because their brains have not fully developed yet, unless absolutely necessary. So it's just sad. There have been big pharma, big medicine has been drugging our children for years.
But look what Biden did when he came in. He reversed the bloody. What do you call it? Diabetes jabs.
Insulin.
Yeah, he reversed that. So the poor people that require insulin, who are now having to pay top dollar again, if not more. So the fact that the greed of the pharmaceutical companies, along with the greed of the industrial military complex, along with the greed of all these other big corporations that have, they're just, how much is enough? You know, there's a point where you got to say, why don't we stop? And then they have a monopolies board that when companies get to that size, they are broken up or they're put into sub-compartments and they cannot buy up things. It's like how the media is controlled by 6 major corporations. That's all the media around the world.
Yeah.
So how are you going to have a fair and balanced, informed public if it's all going to be controlled by the corporations? Because the corporations want you to be basically their product, what they own. They don't see you as a person. They see you as profit margins, as nothing. I mean, I don't buy anything from Amazon. I don't use Google. I don't have Facebook, and I won't use Twitter. Everything I buy locally. I support my local shops and I support the local businesses. Why? Because that's the people that you will get the best products from. You're not going to get it from Amazon because it hasn't got any feeling behind it, because a person who's got their local shop has pride in their local shop, has pride in their local products they're building, or a local carpenter that builds a nice cupboard. That is where we should be looking at doing as well. You know, get away from the Walmarts, get away from the Amazons, and start. I mean, it might cost a little bit more, but by doing that, you're building and helping the community and keeping it within the community.
Yeah.
These companies don't have compassion. They don't have love. The only thing they want is total dominance over everything else. And eventually they'll start eating themselves with like corporate buyouts or corporate wars or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. I can't disagree with you on that. And it's going to continue. You know, they're going to continue trying to separate us and make us so that we can't speak to one another. They're going to continue to divide us.
They will constantly keep you with 2 tribes. As I put, 2 tribes go to war, because that's what they want. They want you to keep you separated into 2 tribes through tribalism. But when you go across to the other side and listen to what they're saying, you'll find, hang on a minute, they're talking about the same stuff as I'm talking about. So why aren't we talking to one another? Because they come from that side of the fence and you're on this side of the fence. It's nonsense. It's off the absolute nonsense.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean,
we have to reach out. We have to turn around and say, look, you might have voted that way. I might have voted that way. It doesn't matter. What's more important is we work together as a community and help each other to get the right people in, instead of these crony politicians that are just lining their pockets and screwing over our communities.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, I want to thank you for coming on. Gonna have you on again soon in the next few weeks. Tell everybody where they can find you, brother.
Well, I've got YouTube and Rumble. You'll have to put the links up on there.
Yes, I will.
But I'm going to be off for a week or so because I'm moving. Because obviously I can't live in this flat anymore because of the memories. It's very hard to deal with. So I'll be moving in the next week. So I'll be back up and running again in April. So that'll be a good time to come back and I'm going to be working on dealing with the media and exposing the media and the history of the media, and how the media's probably cost millions of lives with their ability to conceal, lie, and to create deceptive stories. I mean, we all know about weapons of mass destruction, but how many people know about what they did throughout World War II or before that in World War I? I mean, how much the media has controlled the narrative that's killed millions of people. And they're never held accountable. which is one of the things I keep saying. There has to be accountability for these people. The media cannot carry on the way it's doing at the moment.
Yeah. True. I agree. I just don't know what's going to happen to it. I mean, people have lost faith in it more than ever.
Well, because
but hold on. But then they go from like lesser known media companies like Newsmax, who's run by Christopher Reddy, who's a Clinton apologist and a major donor to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's all the same group of people going off in different ways. Like I said, corporate wars. We have to get media away from corporations, and they cannot be owned by corporations. If you want a free media, they have to be free of corporations, free of government, and they should be able to do their jobs without any hindrance to inform the public of the information, of all the information, not little bits that they want to give you, and the rest of it is like hidden away and you have to find it.
Right. I mean, that's what it is. It's quite sad.
I mean, yeah, we've got all these independent YouTube journalists, yeah, and most of them are crackpots. There's no regulatory level of what can I say? I don't want to say regulation, because regulation is a bad word, but there should be a set standard that they should reach to.
Yeah, people should be able to hold each other accountable. Sadly, exactly. That doesn't happen.
And there should be accountability for it. You can't keep printing lies and say, a source told us this, yeah? And have this way of this little loop round of it. Well, I got told by my source. I mean, oh no, I can't give you the name of my source because that'd be, giving up my source. No, this nonsense they've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years.
Sources say. Always sources say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when you see a news story that says sources say it, it's like 5 sources say in an article. Yeah, there are anonymous sources. I understand the need for that as a journalist, but you can't always defer to sources say. Like, you have to back up what even anonymous sources say with other sources to corroborate them, because you don't know who the source is.
Or show evidence and give the full picture, not part of the picture, because you want a certain narrative to get out there.
Yeah.
They're not journalists anymore. They're storytellers creating a narrative of chaos.
Yeah.
You've got your fat baldy idiot Stelter on CNN going reliable sources, giggling like some girl on helium. Or you've got Angry Man over on Fox, Sean Hannity, thumping his fist down on a desk, giving his spiel.
Or you have...
All of them are corporately owned.
Or you have CIA-trained blue blood Anderson Vanderbilt, but you also have CIA-trained blue blood Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, but don't forget also talking about what Anderson Cooper did. He had this little town hall with Beijing Biden, yeah, and basically they would. Oh no, there's no need to worry about what's happening with the Uyghurs. It's not genocide. It's just cultural differences.
Yeah, you have Max Blumenthal, who's the son of Sidney Blumenthal, saying the same thing, and pretty much saying everything's so great under the Chinese Communist Party. There's no wealth inequality there. Everybody's perfectly fine. So.
Yeah, and that's how these monsters get away with what they do. This is how, like, Stalin got away with what he did in the 30s, what he got away with in the late 30s and in the early 40s. I mean, the stuff I'm going to talk about in April is going to blow people's mind about millions of people that lost their lives, and it was all covered up by the media. And the fact that they knew about it as well, and they just basically, they're working hand in glove with the government or the people in charge who want a certain outcome to come through, so that they stay quiet about it.
Yeah. But that's where we're at, It's the state of things. It truly is. I mean, my grandfather used to say that the news media was destroying America. And That, I mean,
And
he used to say that since I was a
yes,
child. So
and yes, I do distrust organised religion because organised religion is corrupted. I believe in what I believe in. I believe in God and I believe in Jesus. And the first time I'm admitting this publicly because I was sick and tired of people saying, well, no, I don't agree with organised religion because organised religion has been used to orchestrate wars and death and in the name of God, which it shouldn't have been.
yes, I agree.
Don't forget in 322 AD, the reason why Christianity became a religion is because Constantine saw the power behind using a symbol of God, which people would die if they died for God, they died for a higher purpose than what they would do for a man.
And that was established of the modern Catholic Church.
Yeah, which is why the cross was on the shield.
But all right, everybody, take care. That's it. I'm glad you got to join us, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm a little bit all over the place. Like I said, it's still a bit raw. It's what's happened.
I understand, and I'm glad that you were able to tell what's going on out there and tell your story, and people can relate. People probably have lost people to.
Well, it's not that it's the kids that are suffering.
That is true.
They're destroying our children. They're destroying our futures. They're destroying all of it. But why? For what? Why? Because Orange Man's bad.
For the Great Reset.
Yeah, for the Great Reset. Because why? Corporations don't see you as people; they see you as product.
True. You're right. All right, Kevin. Well, that's it, everybody. Take care. God bless. And do your best to spend time with your family, your neighbors, and trust in God. And see you soon. Bye.